If you're not going to help with the kids, then maybe you shouldn't be living here. My husband said it slowly, deliberately, like he had been saving those words all evening and finally decided to use them. My name is Danielle Brooks. I'm 34 years old, and I want to tell you about the night I stopped being invisible in my own home. I work remotely as a project coordinator for a logistics company in Columbus, Ohio. 7 years at the same company, consistent performance reviews, a team that depends on me to catch what everyone else misses. I manage timelines, vendor relationships, cross-department communication, and the kind of quiet crisis prevention that nobody notices until I'm not there. I do it from a small home office in our 3-bedroom house every single morning with a cup of coffee and a closed door and a calendar blocked out like a surgeon's schedule. But to my husband's family, I was just the woman on the laptop. I've always been the responsible one, the planner, the person who reads the fine print, backs up the documents, and thinks 3 steps ahead while everyone else is still reacting to what's directly in front of them. My mother used to say I was born already organized. I used to think that was a compliment. I didn't understand yet that some people see that kind of reliability as something to take advantage of. My husband, Ryan, works construction. Hard work, physical work, long days that end with him genuinely exhausted. I respected that. When we got married 6 years ago, I believed we were building something equal. 2 people with different strengths pointing in the same direction. I believe that completely. That belief cost me more than I want to admit. Because what actually happened, slowly, and without any single conversation where it was decided, was that I became the family's free resource. The babysitter, the holiday organizer, the emotional support line, the person who could always be called because she was home anyway. It didn't happen overnight. It accumulated the way debt accumulates when you're not watching the statements. One small imposition at a time, until the balance was enormous, and nobody even remembered when it started. We lived in a house I helped buy with money I inherited from my Aunt Ruth. A modest house, but a good one. A real one. Mine, in a way that would matter more than anyone realized. If you have ever been used by the people who were supposed to protect you, subscribe right now. If you have ever been the strong one and had that strength turned against you, drop a comment. And if you want to see what happens when a quiet woman finally opens the folder she's been carrying, click hype and keep watching. Thanksgiving at the in-laws was always a production. Patricia's house smells like candle wax and reheated casserole, and a specific kind of tension that everyone pretends isn't there. Football on the television, volume too high, kids bouncing off walls, extended family filling every corner, everyone talking over each other, nobody really listening. Ryan and I had talked a week before, an actual conversation. I told him clearly I would not be babysitting Dana's kids at Thanksgiving. I had done it at Christmas, at Easter, at 2 birthday parties, and at a random Saturday in October that Dana described as just needing a few hours. I had done it without being asked properly, without being thanked meaningfully, and without a single moment where anyone acknowledged that I had my own exhaustion, my own week, my own limits. I asked Ryan to handle it before we arrived. He said, yeah, fine, I'll talk to her. We walked through Patricia's front door at 4 in the afternoon. By 4:04, Dana had appeared from around the corner, dropped 3 children's coats directly onto the chair beside me, and said with a bright tone of someone absolutely certain of the answer, "You've got them tonight, right? I need a real break." She didn't wait for my response. She was already walking toward the living room. I looked across the room at Ryan. He was pouring himself a drink, laughing at something his brother said, completely unbothered. I pulled him aside 10 minutes later. I kept my voice low. We talked about this. You said you'd handle it. He looked at me the way you look at someone who is being difficult on purpose. It's Thanksgiving, Danielle. Can you just not do this tonight? That phrase, just not do this. As if having a limit was a performance. As if asking for one evening of not being the default caregiver was ruining something for everyone. I said nothing. I went back to the kids. So the next hour, I chased a 5-year-old away from the breakable decorations, settled an argument between the 2 older ones over a tablet, and wiped applesauce off a couch cushion while Dana laughed at something across the room. Ryan never looked over once. Not once. Then we sat down for dinner. The table was full. Patricia had cooked for 16 people and arranged everything so that she sat at one end and her opinions could reach the whole room. I was halfway down between Ryan and one of his cousins, with Dana's youngest still pressing against my arm wanting attention. Patricia looked down the table during a brief lull in conversation and said it clearly. The way people say things they've rehearsed, the way people say things they want remembered. Some women just don't have natural maternal instincts. It's a real shame. You can't teach that kind of thing. She wasn't looking at no one specific. She didn't have to be. Everyone at that table knew exactly who she meant. Laughter came from 3 or 4 people. Someone made a small agreeing sound. Ryan was cutting his turkey. He did not look up. He did not say a single word. I felt something cold move through me. Not anger, exactly. Something quieter and more precise than anger. I said, keeping my voice completely steady, I work full time. I'm tired too. That's when Ryan put his fork down, leaned slightly forward, and said it, not quietly, loud enough for his mother, his sister, his brother, 2 cousins, and an aunt I had met twice to hear every syllable. Then watch the kids or move out. The table went sharp with silence. Someone inhaled audibly. A cousin looked down at her plate. Dana said, wow, under her breath, but she was half smiling when she said it. Ryan wasn't done. He added, with the confidence of a man who has never been surprised in his life, it's my house too. I get a say. And then Patricia, his mother, looked at me across that table with a composed, satisfied expression and said, he's right, sweetheart. This is how families work. I did not yell. I did not cry. I did not give them any of the reaction they were set up to receive. I reached slowly into my bag, like you reach for something you've been carrying for exactly this moment, and I touched the property file, the manila folder with the mortgage statements, the bank transfer records, and the deed copies I had brought along for a completely separate meeting I had scheduled with a real estate advisor the following week. I did not pull it out yet. I set my hand on top of it, underneath the table, and I made a decision that was 6 years in the making. Here is what you need to understand about how I arrived at that table with that folder. The betrayal did not begin at Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving. It began 8 months earlier on an ordinary Tuesday. I was in my home office on a vendor call, door half open, Ryan in the kitchen. I heard his voice, relaxed and conversational, talking to Patricia on the phone. Not angry, not frustrated, comfortable. He said, "She doesn't really contribute the way I do. She just sits on a laptop all day. It's not the same." I froze. I kept my voice professional on the call. I stayed completely still, and I listened. He said it with no hesitation, no guilt. He said it the way you repeat something you've said many times before, something that's already settled fact in your mind. And I understood in that moment that this was not a new opinion. This was the story he had been telling his family about me for months, maybe longer. That was the first crack. The second crack came 6 weeks after that. Patricia began calling me directly to schedule babysitting. Not asking, scheduling. "Dana needs you Tuesday. You're home." Click. When I told her I couldn't do Tuesday because I had a full client call block, she paused and then said in a voice that was almost kind, "It's just a few hours, Danielle. It's not like you have a real commute." I said no, calmly, firmly. 2 days later, I found out through Ryan's aunt that Patricia had been telling people I was selfish, that I refused to help family, that I thought I was too good for them. Ryan told me about it the same way he'd tell me about a traffic report. Matter of fact, already moving on. "She's just frustrated, Danielle," I said. "She's spreading lies about me to your family." He said, "Don't make it bigger than it is." The third crack was the office. Ryan came home one evening and told me, not asked, told me that we were going to convert my home office into a playroom for when Dana's kids visited. He had already described the paint colors. He had already told Dana, "We need the space," he said. "Makes sense." I said, "That's my workspace. I work in that room every day. That room is how I pay half this mortgage. Family comes first." He actually said that about converting the room where I earn my income into a playroom for children who do not live with us. I stopped arguing out loud that night because I understood something clearly for the first time. This family did not respond to emotions. They responded to power. I started building a file. Mortgage statements showing every payment I had contributed, bank transfer records going back to the original down payment, a copy of the property deed with the specific clause highlighted in yellow. I organized it the way I organize project deliverables, chronologically, labeled, backed up in 3 locations. Because what Ryan and Patricia and Dana had never known, what Ryan had truly never thought to ask about in 6 years, was where the down payment on our house actually came from. My Aunt Ruth died when I was 29. She was a bookkeeper who spent 40 years living below her means and saving carefully. She never married, she never had children. When she passed, she left me her savings. It was not a fortune, but it was enough. When Ryan and I bought the house, I used the largest portion of that inheritance for the down payment. My contribution was significantly larger than Ryan's. And before we signed a single document, I did something that my father had told me to always do. "Protect what's yours before you share it," he had said. "You can always be generous later. You can't always undo being careless." So I had a clause written into the deed structure. My attorney was thorough and direct. The clause protected my inheritance-based contribution. If the marriage ever dissolved, I held the legal right to compel a sale of the property. Ryan could not simply keep the house. He could not simply make me leave. If I went, the house went with me to market. I never told Ryan about the clause, not because I was planning against him, because I never believed I would need it. I thought it was a formality, like a seatbelt on a short drive. You put it on out of habit, not because you expect the crash. He told me to move out across a dinner table in front of his entire family. I put on my seatbelt. I called Claire the next morning. She has been my best friend since we were 12 years old, and she is the only person in my life who can hear 2 sentences from me and already know what I actually need. When I told her what Ryan had said at that table, she was quiet. Then, "He said that in front of everyone?" "In front of everyone." Another silence. Then, "Okay, what do you need?" Claire's father is a retired property attorney. He is 72 years old, and he speaks with the careful precision of someone who has spent a lifetime knowing that words have legal weight. Claire drove me to her parents' house that Saturday. I brought the entire folder. He reviewed everything over the weekend. Sunday afternoon, he called me. "The clause is valid," he said, "fully enforceable. Your inheritance contribution is legally protected. In the event of dissolution of marriage, you have standing to compel a sale of this property. That is not a threat. That is a legal provision written into the document you both signed." I thanked him. I sat with that information. Meanwhile, Ryan got comfortable. He took my silence over the following days as surrender. He mentioned the playroom conversion to Dana again. He started talking about Thanksgiving like nothing had happened, like what he said at that table was already forgotten and forgiven. One evening, he sat next to me on the couch and said, in a tone that was almost gentle, the most condescending thing he had ever said to me in 6 years. "You know you wouldn't make it on your own, right? It's not a criticism. You just need this." I looked at him. I nodded once. He went back to his phone. He thought my silence was fear. He had never been more wrong about anything in his life. 1 week after Thanksgiving, I told Ryan we needed to sit down with his family and clear the air. He was pleased. He texted Patricia and Dana and told them Sunday afternoon at our house. He told me that night, while I was making tea, that he was glad I was finally ready to move forward. I said, "Me too." They arrived like they owned the room. Patricia walked in first, settled herself on the center cushion of the couch, and looked around our living room the way a landlord looks around a property. Dana came in behind her, already on her phone, already halfway somewhere else in her head. Ryan stood by the window with his arms crossed and his chin slightly up. 3 people who had already written the ending of this conversation before it started. All right, the word carried. "So, are you ready to apologize? We can put all of this behind us? I didn't answer. I walked to the coffee table. I placed 3 copies of the property deed down, one in front of Patricia, one on the cushion beside Dana, one I slid across the table toward Ryan. Every page was clean, printed clearly, with the relevant clause marked in yellow highlighter. Before anyone says anything, I said, and my voice did not waver once, we're going to talk about who actually owns this house. Patricia looked at the papers and then up at me. What is this supposed to be? I told them. All of it. My aunt, the inheritance, the down payment, the specific size of my financial contribution compared to Ryan's, and then the clause. I explained it the way I explain a project deliverable to a client who hasn't done their homework. Slowly, precisely, with zero emotion. If I move out of this house, I said, looking directly at Ryan, this property goes to market immediately. That is not a choice I would be making out of anger. That is the legal mechanism written into the deed that we both signed. You would be leaving too. Complete silence. Dana looked up from her phone for the first time. What? What does that mean? Ryan picked up the papers. I watched his face change as he read. The certainty drained out of him one line at a time. His jaw tightened. He flipped to the second page, then back to the first. This isn't right. His voice was different now. The confidence was gone and something thinner was underneath it. I picked up my phone and placed it on the coffee table between us. I hit the speakerphone button. Claire's father's voice filled the living room. Calm, authoritative, irrefutable. I have personally reviewed the documentation your wife has described. The clause protecting her financial contribution is legally valid and enforceable. She has the right upon dissolution of marriage to compel a sale of this property. This is not a threat. This is a contractual provision that has been in place since the original purchase. Everything she has told you today is accurate. Ryan set the papers down. He didn't slam them. He set them down because there was nothing else to do with them. I looked at my husband, not with hatred, not with satisfaction, with absolute clarity. You told me to move out in front of your entire family. You told me it was your house. So I'm asking you directly, right now, in front of your mother and your sister, are you prepared to lose this house? Because that is the only other option on the table. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Patricia stood up. Her composure was gone, and something harder and uglier was in its place. You planned this, she said. Her voice had gone sharp. You sat on this for years and you planned this. That is not what a wife does. I turned to face her slowly. What a wife does is work full-time, manage the household, organize every holiday, babysit children that aren't hers, absorb every insult, and still keep the folder ready. That is what this wife did, and I did it quietly for a very long time. I let that land. Then I said, you told the family I was selfish. You said I had no maternal instincts across a dinner table full of people. You agreed when your son told me to get out of my own home. So I need you to understand something clearly before you leave today. I am not selfish. I am prepared. Patricia sat back down. Dana said nothing. She was looking at the deed copy in her hand like it was something she'd found in a language she didn't speak. Ryan was staring at the coffee table. I said quietly, and finally, I will not be watching anyone's children unless I decide to. I will not be scheduled. I will not be arranged. I will not be insulted at family dinners, and I will not be told to leave a house that I helped buy with money my aunt left me. Those are not requests. They are the terms of me staying in this marriage. Dana left first. She put the papers down without looking at me and walked to the front door. No goodbye. Patricia stood slowly, picked up her copy of the deed, folded it carefully, and put it in her purse. She looked at Ryan once, like she was waiting for him to fix something. He didn't look back at her. She left without saying a word to me. Ryan and I stood in our living room alone. The coffee table had 3 folders on it, and the echo of a speakerphone call, and 6 years of assumptions that had finally been spoken out loud. He apologized 4 days later. Not dramatically. He sat down at the kitchen table on a Thursday morning before I started work and said, in a quiet, flat voice, I said things I can't take back, at that table and before it. I let my family treat you in ways I should have stopped. I'm sorry. I listened to it all. I didn't interrupt. I didn't tell him immediately it was fine, because it wasn't fine, but I listened. Counseling was not a suggestion. It was the condition. We found a therapist within 2 weeks, someone who asked hard questions equally, and didn't let either of us hide behind vague answers. Actual boundaries came out of those sessions, written down, specific, not emotional agreements that dissolve the next time someone says family first. Real, documented understanding of what was and was not acceptable. His family changed, not warmly, not with apology, but functionally. Dana stopped assuming I was available. Patricia stopped calling me to schedule things. The invitations to family events became actual invitations instead of summons. I attended when I chose to and declined when I didn't, and nobody said anything about it anymore because they understood finally that I was not managed. I was chosen. I kept every document in a fireproof folder on the shelf in my home office. The home office that is still a home office. The playroom that never happened. Because here is what I know now that I wish I had understood years earlier. The people who see your reliability as a resource to extract will never stop extracting it until you show them clearly that there is a cost. Not a threat, not a scene, a document, a clause, a folder you carry in your bag to a Thanksgiving dinner and set on a coffee table in front of people who assumed you had nothing. Patience is not the same as weakness. Silence is not the same as acceptance. And being organized, truly organized, means that when the moment finally comes, you are not scrambling. You are ready. They called me the laptop woman. They called me selfish. They told me to move out. I showed them the deed. Have you ever been the one who held everything together while everyone around you took it for granted? Have you ever been pushed to the edge of your own home by people who forgot who built it? Tell me your story in the comments, every single one. Subscribe if you believe that quiet preparation is its own kind of power. Click hype to send this to someone who needs to hear it today. If this story hit something real for you, hit a like button and leave a thought below. Click hype to help it reach the right people. You being here means everything, and I read every comment you leave.